Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming out. Gosh, what a wonderful crowd. We have given readings and other events both here at the library and back at Austin Peay that had much smaller audiences. It's so nice to see everybody. My name is Barry Kitterman, and I'm one of the editors of Zone 3 Literary Magazine. And today is a celebration of the 25th anniversary of Zone 3. And I'm going to begin by bringing up in just a moment Cindy Marsh, who's responsible for these wonderful works of art here in the hallway. Before I do, I just want to thank a few people. Thanks to Jessica Hartman and Martha Hendrick, who both are here at the public library and who helped prepare this space and make it possible for us. Thanks to Jane Burney, who provided some refreshments. I don't see them, though. Oh, okay, good, yeah. Ooh, hi, Jane. There you are, yeah. We can go on. And I want to say a very special thank you to Susan Wallace, who has been the heart and soul of Zone 3 magazine from its very inception, who has worked tirelessly and without nearly enough gratitude and thanks, and who's back there dying of embarrassment. But Susan, stand up. So I will begin by introducing Cindy. Cindy, you can introduce the next person, who I think is going to be Malcolm, and then we carry on from there. And also we're going to have short introductions, and if anyone goes on too long, I've got the hook and I will bring it out. Okay. Cindy Marsh.
I have to keep this really short, and so my name is Cindy Marsh, and I am the head of the director of the Goldsmith Press and Rare Type Collection. And I think a lot of you remember Arthur Goldsmith and the collection of type, and what we do with that type is really in honor of Arthur. He was a great book collector and a great lover of printing. So our type collection is the largest collection of wood type of any university in the country. So we're very, very proud to have that, and it was with a grant that Malcolm and I applied for from the center, and I think we have Chris Barawa, who is our new center director here. You want to raise your hand, Chris, so we can thank him also. That we applied for a grant, and the purpose of the grant was to do a collaborative project between Zone 3 and this new printing press. And it was supposed to be a series of broadsides about the first 10 years of Zone 3. So we've been here for 15 years, and through a series of whatever, that project never got done. And so all these years later, 15 years later, I felt a huge hole in my heart for Malcolm and the fact that we got this press under phony pretenses and never made good on the promise. And we've done tons of wonderful projects with Blas and with Barry and with lots of and with Amy and lots of other people. So finally, this year, when it was the 25th year, we applied for a Tennessee Arts Commission grant and got not what we wanted, but we got some money, and originally we were going to use 25 professional artists from the area to come in and use the press. Since we didn't get the money we were looking for, and not that they're second-class citizens, we decided to use our fabulous student body to make the prints. So we took a group of students who are in their very first letterpress class. Most of them have never used the press before, and asked them to read these poems, interpret them, partially with the help of David and Susan, and to somehow combine this very large wood type with the small text of the poetry. So, just to wrap up, I want to say thank you very much to Zone 3. It's been an inspiration to have you on campus and to do the uncompromising job that you do. For those of us who are compromising all the time. And I also really want to thank the students. I put them through a grueling time and put a lot of pressure on them, and they have their own lives and their own things. And I wonder if all the students who worked on the broadsides could maybe stand for a minute and we could honor you. Okay, so thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it over to my comrade, my press partner from 15 years ago, Malcolm Glass.
Thank you. This is an absolutely amazing occasion. For one thing, 25 years just crept up on me. And I'm so delighted that Cindy has gotten these together. They are really beautiful, you guys. You did a superb job. I mean, they are really, really stunning. And I was there critiquing the first group of students who worked on this project, and these are just beyond. They're really, really, really nice. So I'm so delighted this has come to pass, and it's appropriate. 25 years. It's really perfect, I think. So, excuse me. And I'm delighted to be here as part of. I could say all kinds of things. I was going to say some kind things about Susan Wallace, but Barry beat me to it, and I won't embarrass her further by having her stand up again. But it is absolutely true. None of this would be happening without her. I can tell you that. She's been behind everything, not only for Zone 3, but in the Center for the Creative Writing Program, the reading series, and she's just done a remarkable job for, golly, 25 years. And we really are grateful to her for everything that she's done. And I also wanted just to say the history of this magazine. Stacy called me for this article in the paper and asked me, did you and David have any idea that it would come to this? And I said, yeah. Absolutely, darn right. I mean, we did. We thought, okay, we've got a situation, we've got some funding, backing. We could really go for a world-class magazine, and without, being self-congratulatory, I think it is that. And I think that's not because of David and me, it's because we were able to find some really superb writers to feature in this magazine. And I just want to say a thank you to David for an absolutely immeasurably beautiful friendship, which would not have happened without this magazine, because we would sit in his office, which was much cozier than mine, and go over these poems that we had not agreed on and try to come to some agreement, and we did agree. And it was just a really wonderful experience as a writer, as an academician, and so I'm really grateful to David for bringing all that into my life through Zone 3. So there's a lot in this magazine you would not know. But that said, let me get to the poems. And I thought somehow these poems turned up, and I thought, oh my gosh, these are recession poems. I don't want to depress people any further, but on the other hand, these are very hopeful poems because they show us we've been here before. So this is World War II, coming out of my parents' experience in the Depression, the Great Depression. And it is called Keeping the Lean Years. I practiced penmanship at the dining room table waited, secretly hoping for an air raid. The excitement of huddling in the dark around the Stromberg Carlson with a scrap of black cloth covering the radio dial, listening for the drone of bombers far over our heads. And while I scribbled ragged saw teeth and sprawled coils across my tablet, my mother sat in a pool of light from the lamp, darning the toe of a sock with black thread, building a thick patch across the white skin of the darning egg, filling in a thread at a time the holes my father had worn walking to work. At the small table by the other chair, next to the cathedral radio, my father smoked his pipe, leaning toward the voice of Edward R. Murrow. And with his ever-feed mechanical pencil, he marked his map, plotting lines and corridors of battle in countries with names so strange they might have been on another planet. When we moved from that house, the spirit of the Great Depression and the war of heroic and worthy sacrifices went with us. Wherever we lived after that, our cupboards were filled with scarcity and caution. The Rexall 1-cent sale was a semi-annual celebration. For years we squirreled away jars of discount guava jelly in the hall closet. 40 years later, my mother sits by the lamp cross-stitching a castle above the placid Rhine. My father has covered the coffee table with piles of coupons my mother has clipped from magazines and newspapers. He has plotted them in groups for her, following closely, dutifully, row on row, the aisles of the Piggly Wiggly. I should have started. I mean, there are lots of people, Stromberg, Carlson, Edward Murrow. You know, this may be a little foreign to you, but you can go home and Google all that stuff and learn about the Great. It wasn't the Great War; it was the Great Second War. Okay, moving in the same direction. My mother she was wonderful with these things, and it's a good thing too. But this is a memory I have of her gift of, well, my bicycle. Pennies, quarters gathered from my mother's change purse for weeks, tumbled from the jar to be rolled, a heavy $15. Foster Fanning's bicycle repair shop, which stood where Abercrombie and Fitch now stands, had 7 used bikes in a row at the curb. We had just enough for the least expensive one. Fanning had cobbled together a mangy hybrid from broken bikes, a Roadmaster frame, the fork and fenders from a Monkey Ward, one wheel from a J.C. Higgins, the other from a Schwinn, and handlebars like horns on a steer from God knows. He had painted it shiny black enamel applied with a brush. The Roadmaster logo was gone. My bicycle was nameless, like Dickinson's frog. It ate puffed rice and wore white t-shirts with rolled up sleeves. It sat at the back of the classroom and never raised its hand. My bike and I rode down the street, anonymous, unnoticed, like the stranger in the corner booth at Duncan's Diner in Fremont, Nebraska, like the pauper in the unmarked grave, the nameless Samaritan too good to be remembered. Well, I hope this cheered you a little to know, yeah, we survived all that, and here we are many years later. And I will watch people in the parking lot sitting there with their cars running, and I thought, boy, you don't know. You wouldn't have done that in 1942 because you wouldn't have gotten home. You would have run out of gas and you wouldn't be able to get any more. It was ration. Again, you need to Google World War II and find out what it was really like because it was a time of sacrifices. And I guess you have to say they were worthy too. So, anyway, I am pleased to be here to introduce our next reader, who is a graduate of Austin Peay, has published poems in many magazines, and I'll come back to that in a second. And his book, one of his books, he won the Storyline Press. This is, what year is this? 05. This is the most recent, Fall Sanctuary, and there are copies of all these books back here, which we'll be happy to sign. And Jeff, as I say, has published so many poems in so many places, and I think he knows this. I would tell my classes, because one of the requirements in my creative writing classes was to submit poems for publication. They need that experience, and who knows? Sometimes they get published, and they'd be amazed. I said, listen, you want to be published, you have to learn from Jeff Hardin, who, as an undergraduate, starting I think in his sophomore year, he had 40 or 50 poems in the mail all the time. As soon as they came back, they were out again. And he was publishing poems in really fine journals as an undergraduate. Well, it's not just persistence, although that's a lot of it, he'll tell you. But this process will help you refine your work. You get those poems back, and you look again, oh my gosh. What? That's awful. Okay. Let me rewrite that one. And then you send it again, and bingo, somebody says, hey, this is really nice. I love this. And it shows up in print. So that is a very important lesson, which I don't know if he would share, but I'll be glad to share it with you. So I'm pleased to introduce our next reader, Jeff Hardin.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I'm going to start with one that's actually in my journal, so it's called A Different Country, which, in many ways, I think maybe that's the best way for me to start. Zone 3 kind of opened up a different country for me. It's clear now we'd have a different country had Ed Sullivan featured poets. I mean, you can watch only so many drummers twirling drumsticks before you just have to shrug and go back to stirring penny pasta. For all the talk of the British invasion, it never did what Blas' poems were doing, sending us out into silences, onto roads deserted all night. Or Neruda, rotting to sadness, needing its black wing, his own blood to go slow, slow, yeah, yeah. For he wanted to receive inside him the rain's trembling hands. Imagine Stafford's quiet voice as households gathered for the evening's really big show in dear detail, in ideal light, the whole country occupied. Small towns of sirens where nothing was solved. Yes, in the name of love, we should have stopped to hear Bishop's marvelous stove, grandmother and child with almanac and tears in a house much like our own. Wendellberry was just breaking ground, and Heaney fingering mud slime, savoring dropped buckets down wells still echoing. Please, Mr. Postman, send us a different letter than the ones we've always opened. Maybe the ones Dickinson said she wrote with pens unseen. Though she had no forum, no supporters, she loves us. We're loved. She said so. And you know, that can't be bad. been, I guess, thinking a lot about, my students text, and argue with that because text is actually a whole, instead of the portion. What they're doing is 160 characters, so it's a portion, so it can't technically be a text. It's the part. But, they send you emails and they put things like LOL. I didn't know what that meant. You may not know what it means either. It means laugh out loud. So I wrote a poem about it. LOL. Laugh out loud is what I'm told in email, which is not words on paper, but on a screen, and not even spelled out, but 3 letters of abbreviation I went all my life not knowing, but laughing out loud anyway, whenever I felt like it, and not being commanded to do so. Despite how horrific sometimes the days are when bulldozers push together dead bodies so the ones living can figure out what to do next, if there is or isn't anything to do. What's the abbreviation for laugh quietly to myself so no one else but God hears, yet so intensely I enter what the leaves know, tumble tipsying down into a stream, leaping to splash on that one rock that doesn't seem to mind or know. Maybe I should stop knowing anything, just cease. Like those birds no one sees fall mid-flight, but surely must, given the entropic nature of even wings beating. If grief can be abbreviated, I haven't found the letters yet. They refuse to step forward, arrange themselves, or they may be a pi-long string of vowels, of course, indecipherable. No one has to tell me to weep out loud. I do so daily for usual reasons, some unbearable, not different than the next guy, and sometimes for all the overlooked reasons, my own and everyone else's. Meanwhile, messages keep arriving. I can't catalog them all. Few, if any, clearly spelled out. One upon the other, stacked up, crowding in, mashed together. I want to scream. Want to burn the sky down. Want delete with a whimper to give the language back to start. So that got me to thinking about the subject line in an email. In fact, I've been working on a book called R.E. And this is from that. It's called Not Enough Space. I'd rather have a conversation than write a poem. But who would I talk to when no one is listening? No one present, or, if present, unfocused, distracted, disinterested. A day of this might be tolerable, understandable. A day of this might be instructive. But days, weeks, years, a lifetime? In the game from childhood, we had to stare each other in the eye and not smile, clap hands and not crack. And now we are adults. Some disappeared, some dead, some sitting near water, hearing the whole earth grieve. I meant to say heave. One person above a grave, mouthing words in a bitter cold. And then that voice that wells up now and then, wondering, is this the gist? I stand in a doorway which seems to amplify the dusk and what isn't being said. Where are the conversations? R.E. words shared. Subject line, not really long enough to follow out a thought. 160 characters to wander our wide names. 160 characters to multiply the void. not enough space to describe the lengths of willow limbs, or labored breathing on a deathbed, or runoff down the hillside, or what the jasmine smells like early mornings as others sleep, and what's at the end of the end, and then after that. No, then. I'd rather have a conversation, am left with elegy instead. And this tugging feeling to expedite, get on with it, get to the point. The shortest distance is not to know another, not to overhear or eavesdrop or ask or really set aside anything, to be a place where words can rest. Subject line. Do these words sound like prayer, like supplication, like lamentation? R-E to the next R-E. I'm gonna introduce David Teal. I'll say this. I suppose I'm not too much younger than Teal was when I first met him in 1986. Though it's safe to say I still feel somewhat like a novice in his presence and in the presence of his poems. That's normal. A student always feels like a student with his teacher. And it's been no secret that Teal was my favorite teacher. I must have sat in his office discussing poems and poetry for more hours than I attended classes at Austin Peay. Great education. All those classes I took. My real and sustaining education, the conversations that lit a fire in me, the voice I still hear in my head as the voice truly intimate with language, I trace back to Teal's office. As I've said before, if, as Heidegger says, language is the house of being, then Teal is the one who first took me into that house and made me feel like I belonged there. Gave me the run of the place. What a gift. To give so much of his time to me, to poetry, poems, other people's words. And what a gift Zone 3 is and has been. So much that has gripped down and awakened, creating a new conversation, an actual conversation. And what a gift his own poems are, complete of heart, but also subversive and looking for the face, for the source, looking for what can awaken the seed, the mystery none of us can quite grab hold of. What a different country.
Malcolm was J.C. Higgins of Sears.
Yeah.
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Poems took me back. I mean, Malcolm and I are the same age. You go to Sears and get good, better, or best. Or from our perspective, best, better, or good. And it was Stuart Bonington who pointed out to me just a few weeks ago that in Kroger's now, at the beer case, which is a long case, goes all the way down, at one end you get super premium. In the middle you get premium. Down where I am, where Stuart is, you get sub-premium. You can't even get good anymore. It's sub-premium. What's happened to the language when you have an expression like sub-premium? It's so contradictory. It doesn't mean a damn thing. You know, but there it is. Malcolm is so right in what he said initially about the magazine. It took me back when you said it, but I wanted to say something like that, but couldn't get anywhere near it. Did we know it was going to amount to anything? Sure we did. And we don't have to take any credit for it. we just kind of kept nudging it along to see what it wanted to do, and who would show up, and it all happened. We never had, neither Malcolm nor I is an ideologue of any sort. We didn't have any project, any big agenda or anything. We just wanted to publish good poems, and they showed up. And the only bad thing about it was I remember reading an awful lot of bad poems. And then I would go to the faculty lounge and I would complain, and David Snyder, rest his soul. David Snyder would say, he's a good scientist. He said, no, sir, it's not a bad poem, Till. That's just a poem you don't like. It's not a bad poem. And I would say, well, yeah, you're right to remind me of that. And some of those poems that were just poems that I didn't like. But most of them were bad poems. We never got past that. It was okay. God, it was just wonderful doing the magazine. It really was. And I wanted to read one poem from the magazine. So I'll read the poem that's on the cover. For a long time we put a poem on the cover. I don't know whether anybody else was doing that. But and I don't know, it was no big deal, but it just seemed, well, it would be a good thing to do. So we did that. Couldn't put a very long one on there, but otherwise. So this was a poem of Dave Edders. Dave Etter was our second writer-in-residence from up in Elburn, Illinois, which is a little south and some west of Chicago. And Dave had a book called Alliance, Illinois, full of poems who each poem belonged to one of the residents of Alliance, Illinois. So you'd have the name of the person and then the title and then the poem. And alliance is, the word alliance is in this poem, so I give you warning. Donna's mother here is referring to the town of Alliance. It's sort of like, Dave Etter was wanting to do a contemporary, his own take on Edgar Lee Masters' Spoon River, from the Spoon River Anthology, or E.A. Robinson's Tilbury Town, or Faulkner's Yakima County, or American, a lot of that, Sherwood Anderson's Winesburg, Ohio. But this poem is called Weeping. The last time I saw Donna's mother, she was standing in the doorway in bare feet and tight-fitting robe, her hair screwed up in clay-brown rags, a wart of quince jam on her chin. Donna's little sister at her side. We had said goodbye a dozen times, and Donna had kissed her and kissed her. Alliance is so far from here, Donna's mother said, and blew her nose. Call you on Sunday, Donna said. We will write you often, I said. No, you won't, Donna's mother said. You won't write, and you won't call either. Bye, Donna, her little sister said. The last time I saw Donna's mother, she was standing in the doorway, weeping like a rain of willow leaves. Now, that'd be a pretty ordinary but satisfying little vignette if it weren't for Dave Etter's genius, who has him say so very formally, we will write you often. He doesn't say we'll write you a lot. We will write you often. He knows without even knowing it that he's lying. And there's just that whole complex of feeling around that, It's a genius to get at that. Okay. I'm going to read now, not a poem. I don't know whether I've ever read this before or not. I have a nagging feeling I have. I wish I hadn't. I wish this was going to be the first time, but I don't think it is. But maybe it is. And I don't want to call it a poem. Or if I did, I might have to say it's really a bad poem. So I want to call it an entertainment. And it works out pretty well with something Jeff was talking about. And I think I'm going to title it The Commuter. Now, this takes place before we've got text messaging, before we've got the cell phone, maybe even almost before we've got the CB radio. It goes back that far. And so how did we get in wrecks before we had the cell phone? Well, of course, cigarettes, We've been having wrecks over cigarettes for a long time. But beyond that, it was a question of makeup. It was more complicated and dangerous for women because they had all that stuff, lipstick, blush, eyeshadow, etc. And they could put it all on. You'd be driving along behind some woman, putting all that stuff. And guys would comb their hair and adjust their ties and everything, So that's what this is about. Oh, and it goes back at one point into the 50s where Malcolm will remember this. If you were a real stud, one of the hoods, you had a duck's ass, a ducktail haircut. I couldn't have one. My mother wouldn't let me have a crew cut. But and the guys who had ducktail haircuts, if they had a car, or even when they didn't have a car, that's where that hair is swept back and slicked down on the side, And you do it like this. And if you got a steering wheel, you put your elbows on the wheel, like that. That's the way that goes. Okay. Some lovely woman driving down the boulevard puts lipstick on the rear view mirror, making herself beautiful to look at. Years ago, driving the superhighway east in sweltering Missouri, I saw on the access road running parallel below, before it right-angled south into tractors and cowbells, I saw a boy, both elbows on the wheel of an old Ford, combing back his hair, licking his wrists like a dog. His girl was the boat I lost on a sailing pond in a high wind. Some lovely woman, where I drive home from work, leans to kiss the face of a Hollywood star, me, on the horizon, where I converge with a Cadillac traveling west on 43rd. That's an entertainment. Okay. Now, those of you who've been keeping up with this, I've been working on the wallpaper poems and working them over and over and over for years, and they're still not finished. I don't know that I've ever read any version of the fifth one or not, but this is it. And the wallpaper poems have to do with wallpaper, and they're from the perspective of someone who is sometimes a boy, sometimes a child, sometimes a man, in this case an absolute infant at last. And the impact of wallpaper. There's something behind the wallpaper. There's something in the dark behind the wall itself. There's something in the dark under logs in the woods and so on. There's something in the dark. There's something down there, back there. It's about that. This is the fifth and last section. There are two epigraphs. One I've got actually in German here, but I don't know German. I can't read German. So it's kind of an affectation to put it in German, isn't it? But here it is. And it's Friedrich Schiller from Der Taucher, or whatever, which means the diver. And the translation is, fortunate is he who swims up here in the roseate light. And I found it referred to importantly in Freud's Civilization and Its Discontents. Freud's a hero of mine. What happens if you dive way, way, way down deep in the watery things? Better to be up here in the roseate light. And the other epigraph is from Ellen Malloy's Last Cheater's Waltz. Ellen Malloy did a reading and was here for a little while. When? I can't remember what year it was. And she died unhappily just three years ago maybe of a massive heart attack. She's a wonderful writer. And this is from her book called The Last Cheater's Waltz, which is an attempt to find the actual and the spiritual geography, ecology of the place where she lived in the Four Corners in the Southwest. Around wild creatures with no conscious effort whatsoever, I simply seemed to be wallpaper. When the kit fox brushed past me, my skin burned. The rest of my body became like smoke. So small, yet he wasn't to his own mind. 3 faces came to him from the wallpaper. Outside, it was summer. Intent on him to regard what he was doing there, but were larger than could be got into focus, than seemed, he thought, necessary. What they did to him was love. It must have been summer. The wallpaper meant for a garden swayed before him like peonies, all nimbus. Where he lived hove like a sea. That was all. Recessional they remained in the wallpaper, to be called out from among gladiolas and fleur-de-lis by some way of looking that was of his own, but not yet mastered or ever would be. Scattered, embedded in all that ruckus of broken stems that will not lie straight or fall flat against the sky so that you or anyone could see her face without trying. Like the rabbit's face behind the stone in the swirl at the water's edge or among leaves of doomed elms. How many rabbits can you see? 2 of the faces he knew otherwise, and once his father's horse-colored arm where the window was. Was the 3rd his mother's? Scattered, embedded in all that ruckus of broken stems, or behind the stone, the swirl at the water's edge, or among leaves of doomed elms. Mother of roses, mother of the night full of crickets, whose face is hidden in her daughter's hands, who cuts her son's hair, whose own hair dries in the sun, mother who binds the lion to the tethering post, who lets loose the lion among the sheep of the field to run riot, mother who establishes gravity, who marries the stones and divides them from water, mother of wallpaper, hidden away like the moon, mother of the 3 mothers. Come out, oh, come out, wherever you are. So that's the last poems. And now Phyllis Gobbell did a master's degree with us here at Austin Peay, earned her master's degree in 2002. I remember I was one of the readers of her creative thesis. She is currently Associate Professor of English at Nashville State Community College, where she is also the editor of the Campus Literary Journal and teaches creative writing along with composition and literature. She has, with co-authors, a couple of books. One published, a book that deals with the Perry March Perry March murder case. We all remember, I suspect, reading about that over a period of years. That book is called Unfinished Canvas, and was published by Berkeley in 2007, co-author Michael Glasgow. Forthcoming, a book called Season of Darkness, again a book about an instance of actual crime. She has also written fiction and nonfiction that she has published in various places and that have earned her several awards. So it's a pleasure to welcome back here to we've published Phyllis in Zone 3 too, I should say. So we're glad to have you back with us, Phyllis. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Till. It's great to be back after 8 years. Hard to believe. When I figured that up, I just hardly believe it's been 8 years since I graduated here. I still go back to my notes from graduate school, and I'm always inspired when I think about my courses and my professors there. I'm sure that people who knew me did not expect me to be writing true crime, and I didn't really count on doing that either, but that's, as they say, a long story. But I was very interested in the March case that Dr. Till mentioned, and it was a case Nashville was all caught up in, and so when it was solved after 10 years, I did write a true crime. And when the book came out and people asked me, well, you're going to be a true crime writer now. I said, oh, no, that's just a fluke. I'm not going to write true crime anymore unless they solve the Marcia Trimble case. And even as I was saying that, the cold case detectives were very close to making an arrest, and that case, there's been a conviction in that case, and so that book will be coming out. So I really don't expect to be writing any more true crime. But I do want to read from an unfinished canvas. Janet March, if you may have followed the case, but if you didn't, Janet March was a young artist, very promising young artist, mother of 2 small children. Her husband was an up-and-coming young attorney in Nashville. They lived in their dream house, or at least it was Janet's dream house. She had designed it. And to people on the outside, they seemed to have a perfect life, but Janet had an appointment scheduled with the divorce attorney on August 16, and I'm going to take up and read a couple of pages. I'm going to take it up the evening before on August 15, 1996. Perry and Janet and the children have dinner. Janet does some work in her studio, and Perry puts the children to bed. This time, the arguing begins at the kitchen table. According to Perry's version of the night's events, the argument ends when Janet gets into her Volvo, slams the door, and drives away. The story that Perry March will give police is this. At about 8, Janet packs some bags and she says she's going on a vacation like the vacation you've been having, she says, referring to his nights in the Budgetel and Hampton Inn. She takes his credit card, a bag of marijuana, and several $1,000s in cash and says she'll be back for Sammy's birthday. She leaves a to-do list for Perry, items like change burned out light bulbs and clean up your closet, chores Perry has neglected doing. The document is saved on the computer at 8:15. Perry follows her outside into the balmy night, thick with the summer sounds of frogs and crickets. He demands to know where she's going. None of your business. See how it is with the kids, she says. A neighbor, Helen Ward, who lives at 1 Blackberry Road, will report hearing a loud male voice coming from their driveway. She will tell police that Janet and Perry were in the habit of arguing in the driveway, apparently to keep from waking the children. Janet says, "See ya," and drives away, and it's the last time Perry sees his wife. That's Perry's story. He calls a friend of theirs, Lori Rummel, and he says, well, she's gone. And then he calls his brother and sister in the Chicago area, and he says, Janet has left. And then he calls Janet's parents. At midnight, he dials the Levine's number. There is a phone on each side of the bed. Carolyn and Larry both pick up at the same time. Larry's voice is thick with sleep, but quickly turns anxious when Perry says Janet has left. Left? What do you mean? Where is she gone? I don't know where. Perry, tell me exactly what happened, says Carolyn. We had an argument and she packed some bags and just drove away, Perry says, not with the self-assured arrogance that normally resonates in his voice, but with the whine of a disappointed child. Larry is quiet. He closes his eyes and listens as Carolyn continues the conversation. She asks about the children. Perry says they're sleeping. He recites the events of the night once again. He sounds bewildered, the way he often sounds after he and Janet argue, and he rushes to call Carolyn. In some ways, she has been a surrogate mother to him. Her heart always went out to him because he missed having a mother as he was growing up. Finally, Carolyn says, Perry, don't worry. I'm sure if you had an argument, she's upset. She's probably driving around to cool off. She'll be back. Call me when she comes home. In a written statement Perry will make to the police 2 weeks after Janet's disappearance, he says, Janet had left like this before, so we all settled down to wait. Carolyn Levine will tell police that Janet had never left home like that. The dark night fades into dawn. Light streaks the sky as Nashville wakes up. It's another hot August day, an ordinary day for most of the city's residents, but life at 3 Blackberry Road has changed forever. Janet does not come home. Thank you. And now I have the privilege of introducing our next reader, and he's not a stranger to anyone here. Barry Kitterman has been at Austin Peay since 1994. When I was looking up some things about him to make this introduction, I didn't know all of these things. You may know that he grew up in California and received his degree at Berkeley, then went to the Peace Corps for a couple of years. I did know that. He did his MFA at the University of Montana. He's taught at IU East, the Miami University of Ohio, and 2 universities in the People's Republic of China. And he, as I said, he came to Clarksville in 1994, where he lives with his wife and 2 children. He's coordinated the creative writing program and the visiting writing series and published many pieces of short fiction. The Baker's Boy is a novel that was published in 2008, and he also has a collection of short stories coming out soon. On a personal note, he was my thesis professor, and he taught the creative nonfiction class when the first semester that I came here, and when I went into that class and saw him and heard him and got through that first day, I said, I'm going to like it here. And I did. And so, welcome, Barry Kitterman.
Thank you, Phyllis. I want to thank Cindy again for the wonderful work. Where are you, Cindy? Here you are. Thank you so much for this work and for other opportunities to work with you and the press. Those are really special memories for me. What did we do? About 3 different projects, I think, and each one of them meant a lot to me. Cindy and I came to Austin Peay at the same time, and I was just thinking about that when Malcolm talked about, or David talked about, good, better, and best. And I came with these 2 guys, and I was good at best, at most. And I had a lot to live up to. And they were wonderful people to work with. They had been doing Zone 3 for about more than 10 years when I got here. And at that time, it was strictly a poetry journal. But all things have to change. People sometimes ask us why the magazine is called Zone 3. And that's because a long time ago, Dave and Malcolm looked at the back of a seed packet, and the country was divided into zones. It's a planting zone. Well, ironically, they've changed it all, and we are no longer in Zone 3. We are in Zone 9 or something. 6, Zone 6. So maybe that's telling how much things change. But it's your own fault, really, because you opened the door and published one of my stories in about 1998 or 99, and after that said, let's allow the magazine to publish fiction. And so if you don't like the way it turned out, it's your own fault, okay? There have been other changes since then. And I love the look of the magazine when that you guys put together with the poems on the front and always a muted color. And just, those are beautiful, beautiful magazines. We now do a little bit of artwork, and the last 5 years, 6 years, we have asked for art faculty from Austin Peay to give us work that we put on the cover, and we hope that those are pleasing to you as they are to us. We've started doing some nonfiction as well. And we started a press, and the Zone 3 Press. The first book that we published was Dave Till's book of poems, Oval. And what a great way to kick off that venture. In years after that, we've done 4 more books of poetry. We have a first book competition. And we did a book of essays by Dr. Joseph Asambe. And all those things mean a great deal to me. But we have always striven, is that the word, striven? Strived? We have always tried very hard to honor the integrity and faith with what you guys started so many years ago. I'm going to read just a couple of pages from my novel, The Baker's Boy, and I'm going to read the first 2 pages just so I don't have to explain anything. There is a cafe on Franklin Street run by a woman I know, a young mother with 2 small girls who love her fiercely. They would come down to the cafe with her every day if their mother allowed it. The woman's name is Stacey, and she puts in long hours selling bakery goods and coffee to a town that isn't geared to what's popular everywhere else nowadays: cappuccino and latte, the espresso drinks. Last August, Stacey hired me to work the morning hours in her cafe so she wouldn't have to get up so early, so her children, who share the bed with her, could sleep until dawn. She wanted to give her husband, Tony, a chance to sleep in. He's a student up at the college. The cafe is a lot like the other jobs I've had. I've had a lifetime of jobs already. I've done construction. I've sold half the products you can imagine and a few items you can't imagine. True crime magazines, Christmas trees, salmon eggs. I grew up in Tennessee, but I went to sea twice before I came back to Tennessee for good. I worked in a sporting goods shop for 5 years where I became knowledgeable about fishing tackle. People who come into the cafe sometimes remember me from the sporting goods place. To me, a job's a job. I've been paid by the month, by the week, by the hour. I've worked for tips. I've drawn unemployment. I went to college, but college didn't change me. I've never done anything illegal on purpose, although for 6 months I moved rental cars around the state for equity, and some of the time the trunks of those cars were full of marijuana. A guy told me about it later. I wish he hadn't. I'm known as a good worker, so it puzzles some people when I move from one job to the next. People get used to having me around. I told Stacey I'd be good help, but I wasn't counting on some of the confusion. 4 months on the job, and I can't remember the difference between a mocha and a latte without looking up at the little sign above the machine. I can grind the beans from Kenya or Madagascar, and I know how to steam milk, even if I don't always get it right, or so the customers tell me. I'm not an espresso drinker. I don't do that to myself. It doesn't matter, though. Stacey didn't hire me to make coffee. I am the baker. By the time the cafe opens, I've already been in the kitchen for 3 hours, mixing the day's bread, getting the frozen bagels and croissants into the oven. A lot of what Stacey sells comes to the back door in big trucks from New Jersey. We're in the middle part of Tennessee here, a long way from New Jersey. The customers don't ask which baked goods are frozen and which are fresh, and Stacey doesn't tell them, but I can't take pride in anything that's frozen. It's different with bread. We make it the way we're supposed to, from flour and oil and yeast and salt and water, of course. Bread is like a story I can tell again and again. Each time I change the details a little, and sometimes I forget a detail or add one on a whim, and the story goes somewhere I didn't intend for it to go. Still, the new version of the story is as good as the old one, and I may decide to tell it that way the next time. When I put in my time as a deckhand, and this was a lot of jobs ago, a lot of years ago, I knew an old salt who used to drink gin in his bunk in the afternoon, and by dinner time, he would tell us how he survived Pearl Harbor and went on to defeat the whole of Japan. He said it was all true. He told me once, "You know what the difference is between a fairy tale and a sea story?" I didn't know. A fairy tale begins once upon a time, he said, his eyes a little moist, as if he was remembering his childhood. On the other hand, he said, here's how a sea story begins. This is no shit. I'll tell you a story. It's no sea story. You wouldn't get me out on the ocean again. But like the man was trying to say, every word I'm telling you is true. This is how I came to be in Stacey's cafe the night of the ice storm. This is how we all came to be there. My life has changed now, and everything in it looks different to me. The first will be last, and the last will be first, and the rest is often forgotten. But this is a good place to start. Thank you. So it's my very great pleasure to introduce our next reader, Amy Wright, Dr. Amy Wright, who's been here at Austin Peay for 3 years now. It's kind of interesting. One time the program got along fine with 2 people, David and Malcolm, but now we need 3 to do the same amount of work. Amy came to us from Colorado, where she did her graduate work, was teaching for a year at the University of Tennessee, and we were very pleased to get her here. She is now currently has taken over our creative nonfiction classes, and soon we hope to start a first book award in creative nonfiction to go along with the poetry books that we're doing. So, Amy.
Thank you all so much for coming out. Couldn't you just listen to Barry read all night? I would rather do that, thanks. This is from my chapbook, There Are No New Ways to Kill a Man. And actually there are. There are continually being reinvented new ways to kill men and women. This is the first poem in the series. There is no male man, and there are only male men. Pleat of days, swallow of wind. If I had a child, I would be a child. I have been part of the furniture. I have worn my grandmother's house dress and planted beans the rain drowned. There are no new ways to kill a man. But like I said, I found out a couple of them. There are even new Pringles they make in Saigon, mayonnaise and ketchup colored. I'm pretty sure those could kill several hundred men. Totally new way. The 15 Nasties. Aren't you glad there are only 15? That's all. Once you make it through 15 youngsters, you're home free. 12 and I'm unreachable. What will be required of me? As in a dream, I am still a nerve sculpture. Hair glitters in thirsty weather, made lovely by ruthlessness. Distinguished for extinguished, furnished for famished. Lau says, be alive to difficulty. Being alive is difficulty. I'd rather be strangled than so awfully disappointed. But then, I've never been strangled. One cannot live without hope. Eliot was wrong about that. But hope cannot be the thing, just as the end cannot. The thing is the thing, and the waiting. One need only change a tire to crest the newest horizon, expecting everything of us. Everything and nothing. You either love yourself or you don't. Inside a poem like marble, the words had a sort of bloom on them, bubbling with rust like hot red wine. In St. Paul's vision, a bridge like a hair connects this world narrowly to paradise, like a skein of electricity. One walks for blocks, for seasons, then lifts the head and is dazzled. Thank you all so much. Blas Falconer is the author of a poetry collection entitled A Question of Gravity and Light and a chapbook, The Perfect Hour. He's also the co-editor of both Mentor and Muse, Essays from Poets to Poets, forthcoming in 2010, and the other Latina O. Is that how you say it? Latina O. Splendid. Diverging Lines in the New Canon. That's forthcoming in the year 2011. He's received several awards for his poetry, most recently the Maureen Egan Writers Exchange Award from Poets and Writers. Very impressive. His poems have appeared in various literary journals, including the Crab Orchard Review, Puerto del Sol, Luna, Indiana Review, and Green Mountains Review. But none of those details express how lucky that I am to have him as a colleague. He's very supportive and generous and intelligent. In Beyond This, a poem from A Question of Gravity and Light, he writes, "Somewhere a gold band turns in a man's hands, drops into a bowl of cold peach soup. He pinches his ring below the running water, but days later says it still sticks to the skin. What if you could see that far or farther? What if you had a colleague who could?
Thank you so much for coming. I'm just going to read a few poems, but before I do, I want to reiterate what other people have said. I want to thank Malcolm and David for what they've done with Zone 3. I want to thank Barry and Amy for working, just being such great co-editors. I love doing this. I love working on the magazine. And of course, I have to thank Susan Wallace, who does everything. And the students. What great. I love those. The work that you've done out there. It's great. I have to have a copy soon. All right, I'm just going to read 3 poems. The first one is just a lyric poem. It's a dramatic monologue. So it has its own narrative, but I should also mention that it's within the context of a book, and so there's another narrative that it's kind of overlapping with. And a couple poems before this one, the speaker learns that his beloved has just recently been diagnosed with HIV. And the title is Never. But Peter declared, I will never leave you. I see that far. Next week in empty pockets. Next month in coins scattered on a bed beside a ring. Once I fell and hit my head. I opened my eyes and couldn't see. Then I could, not before my mother sang softly in my ear, okay, okay, but she wasn't sure. She squeezed my hand in her hands, how much the gesture wants to say. This is how it will happen. One voice over many, the constellations shifting above. Nothing else will matter, not the men, what they say, or what you say. It won't count. It won't mean a goddamn thing. You'll save yourself. Understand? Yourself. All right, lighter poem. It's called Perihelion, and there are a couple of references to Taino Indian legends and other things, but I guess the only thing you really need to know is this lyric poem is simply trying to capture that moment when you realize you're in love. Perihelion. And it is brighter, clearer, the hangers robed with winter coats, the cat at the open window. The breeze breaks a stillness that fell on the house weeks ago, and everything seems full of its own potential, again, like a thin reed or taut string, a hammer. In the photo, my grandmother presses a finger to a glass globe, birds in a snow flurry, and looks as if she's on the verge, like her Yadro figurine, who knows what she wants, a porcelain hand grasping at blue stems. There is a story, a hummingbird, and the one hibiscus he searches for. How tired his wings must be. Light falls through the glass. A figure climbs the steps. A red scarf. It's the way, standing at the stove, I stir, the spoon warming in my hand. First, I don't notice. Then, it's too hot to hold. And my last poem is actually a prose poem, so I thought I'd go from 2 lyric poems to a prose poem. It's a more recent poem, and it's in a sequence about the adoption of my son. And, let's see. When we first adopted our son, my partner worked very few hours. And so we had this kind of ideal vision of kind of passing the baby back and forth, me writing a poem, him, doing whatever. He's a wardrobe stylist. He worked, I think, 8 days a month. But then a couple weeks after the baby was born, he got this little gig to work with an up-and-coming singer named Taylor Swift. You may have heard of her. She's been kind of busy the last year and a half, And so that vision of me and Joseph working together didn't kind of come to pass. And I ended up, it's been wonderful. I've really loved being with my son. But I was also very tired. I was so tired, unbelievably tired. And this poem kind of captures that kind of surreal time when I was waking up every 3 hours and then coming to school to teach, and my poor students. I don't know what happened during those semesters, but anyway. So it's titled "After You've Been Gone a Long Time." There are no rubies here, but saying so brings one to mind. And they aren't petals as much as one furled bud with a very long stem. Ants take everything, little by little, before you know it. You came home briefly, for instance, and I was asleep, so it was as though you hadn't come at all, but something was missing. More time, I thought, might be like more water and might make it taste less bitter, but it only made it more to drink. Sometimes I can't stand waiting. If you were here, you'd see what I mean, someone staring off all the time. Once, when I fell, someone gasped, which only made me cry louder, and people gathered around to see fear that looked like pain. That's what I'm trying to say. The neighbors mow the yard. It sounds like a plane overhead where everything is clear. Thank you so much for coming.